The silent cry, the twin sons of Lesara, painted the crystal spires of New Haven in shades of gold and amber as another peaceful day began on the Zephyrian homeworld. Children with their distinctive silver hair and luminous blue eyes ran through. Parks filled with singing flowers, while their parents tended to floating gardens that had never known the touch of war. For 800 years, the Zephyrians had lived in harmony. Their advanced but peaceful civilization focused on art, science, and the cultivation of beauty in all its forms. Kira Voss stood on the observation deck of the Central Communications Hub, watching the morning light dance across the city's bioluminescent towers. As the chief communications engineer for the planetary defense grid, she had spent years maintaining systems that had never been used for their intended purpose. The Zephyrians had no enemies, no conflicts, and no need for weapons beyond basic planetary defense against meteors and space debris. They trusted in the Galactic Federation's promise of protection, believing that civilization had evolved beyond the brutality of ancient wars. That morning, everything changed. The first sign wasn't an explosion or an alarm. It was silence. The constant hum of interstellar communication that had filled the airways for centuries suddenly cut out, leaving an eerie quiet that made Kira's sensitive hearing ring. She moved quickly to her control station, her four-fingered hands dancing across holographic displays as she tried to understand what was happening. Then the sky began to burn. Massive wedge-shaped vessels materialized in Lysara's upper atmosphere, their dark hulls seeming to absorb light rather than reflect it. These were ships of the Void Syndicate, an empire that had existed in the galaxy's outer rim for millennia, conquering and enslaving entire species before retreating into the cosmic darkness between spiral arms. Most civilized worlds considered them extinct, a boogeyman from darker ages. But the Zephyrians were about to learn that some monsters never truly die. The first bombardment turned New Haven's eastern district into a crater of molten glass. The singing flowers fell silent forever as thermal weapons scorched the very air, and the crystal spires that had stood for centuries crumbled like sand. Kira watched in horror as escape pods launched desperately from the dying city, only to be picked off one by Syndicate fighters that moved like predatory insects through the smoke-filled sky. "All Federation channels are dead," reported her assistant, Jael, his voice cracking with fear. "The relay stations. They're all gone. The Syndicate hit them first." Kira felt her world collapsing around her. The Galactic Federation had promised protection, had sworn that their fleets would respond to any threat. But the communication networks that should have carried their distress calls had been systematically destroyed. The Zephyrians were alone, facing an enemy that seemed to take pleasure in causing maximum suffering. Elder Nyx, the last surviving member of the High Council, materialized as a flickering hologram in the communication center. Her ancient face was marked with burns, and her ceremonial robes were torn and bloodied. "Kira," she said, her voice barely a whisper, "the Federation cannot hear us. Our people are dying. Is there anything else? Any old system, any forgotten channel?" Kira's mind raced. The communication hub was built on the ruins of an ancient facility, one that dated back to the early days of galactic contact. Most of the old equipment had been stripped out decades ago, replaced with modern Federation standard systems. But there might be something in the lower levels, something forgotten. She took the emergency lift down to the basement levels, areas that hadn't been visited in years. Dust-covered consoles lined the walls, their surfaces marked with symbols she didn't recognize. Then she saw it, a small terminal in the corner, almost hidden behind a stack of obsolete data cores. The markings on its surface were different from anything she'd seen before, angular and efficient in a way that spoke of a completely different design philosophy. When she activated the ancient console, text appeared in a script that was only vaguely familiar. She recognized it from historical archives as Old Terran, the written language of humanity before they had withdrawn from galactic society 2 centuries ago. Most species considered Earth a dead world now, its people either extinct or so diminished that they posed no threat to anyone. But the console was active, its systems somehow still connected to something far beyond Lysara's dying communication. Grid.Kira had learned basic Old Terran in university as part of her xenological studies. The interface was crude by modern standards, but functional. A message field appeared, along with coordinates that seemed to reach into deep space, far beyond the Federation's borders. According to the display, this was a direct line to something called the Soul Defense Network. Above her, the building shook as another bombardment wave struck the city. Through the basement's small windows, she could see the orange glow of fires, consuming everything she had ever known. The Void Syndicate wasn't just conquering Lysara. They were systematically erasing it, turning a world of beauty into a monument to destruction. With trembling fingers, Kira began to type her message in broken Old Terran. "This is Lysara. We are under attack. Void Syndicate is killing everyone. Galactic Federation cannot hear us. Please, if anyone receives this, we need help. Our people are dying. Children are dying. Please help us." She hesitated for a moment before adding, "We know humans withdrew from Galaxy. We know you have no reason to care about us. But we are begging you. Please help." When she pressed the transmission button, the console hummed briefly and went dark. For several minutes, nothing happened. Kira began to think that her desperate gamble had failed, that she had wasted precious time that could have been spent helping with evacuations. Then something changed in the space. Around Lysara, the Void Syndicate fleet had positioned itself in a perfect blockade formation around the planet, their dark ships arranged to prevent any escape while maintaining optimal bombardment positions. Commander Thale stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Bone Harvest, watching with satisfaction as another Zephyrian city burned below. The Syndicate had refined the art of conquest over millennia, and the systematic destruction of hope was just as important as the destruction of infrastructure. "Status report," Thale commanded, his voice a harsh rasp that came from breathing the toxic atmosphere of his homeworld. "All major population centers are under bombardment," his tactical officer reported. "Estimated civilian casualties are approaching 6 million. No Federation response detected on any channel." Thale allowed himself a rare smile. The Zephyrians had been so confident in their Federation protection, so naive in their belief that civilization had moved beyond conquest and slavery. Soon, the survivors would be loaded into the Syndicate's processing ships, where they would learn the true meaning of despair before being sold to the highest bidders in the Outer Rim slave markets. That was when his sensors officer began screaming. "Commander, multiple contacts. Unknown vessels emerging from hyperspace." The main display lit up with dozens of new contacts, ships that appeared as if materializing from the void itself. But these weren't Federation vessels with their bright hulls and proud insignias. These ships were massive, angular, and dark, their surfaces seeming to absorb sensor beams and light alike. They moved with purpose and coordination that spoke of military precision, arranging themselves in formations that the Syndicate's databases couldn't identify. "What empire do they represent?" Thale demanded. "Identify those ships." "Unknown configuration." "Commander, hull materials are absorbing our scans." No response to standard hails. "But sir, the energy signatures. They're massive. These ships are larger than anything in our databases." Thale studied the tactical display with growing unease. The newcomer fleet had positioned itself between the Syndicate forces and Lysara, their formation suggesting both protection and preparation for battle. There were 37 vessels in total, ranging from sleek destroyers to massive dreadnoughts. That dwarfed even the bone harvest. Then a transmission came through on all frequencies, broadcast in every major galactic language simultaneously. The voice was calm, human, and carried an undertone of carefully controlled anger. Asterisk. A human soldier approached her, his power armor retracting to reveal the face of a middle-aged man with kind eyes and gray hair. "Ms. Vos," he said in carefully pronounced Zephyrian. "I'm Colonel Williams, Earth Marine Corps. We received your transmission." Kira felt tears running down her face as she looked around at her city being reborn. "I didn't think anyone would come," she whispered. "I thought we were alone." "You were never alone," Williams replied gently. "Humanity doesn't abandon innocent people to monsters. We just needed time to build the tools to help you properly." Above them, Admiral Chun's voice echoed across all communication frequencies, broadcast to every world in the galaxy. "This is Admiral Sarah Chun of the Seoul Defense Force, speaking for the governments and peoples of Earth and her colonies. Today, the planet Lysara called for help against an unprovoked attack by the Void Syndicate. We have answered that call, as we will answer any similar call in the future. Let this serve as notice to all who would prey upon the innocent. Humanity is no longer content to watch from the sidelines while monsters devour the helpless. We have spent 2 centuries building the tools necessary to protect those who cannot protect themselves. We have ships that can cross the galaxy in days, weapons that can end wars in minutes, and the will to use both when necessary. To the peaceful species of the galaxy, you are under our protection now, whether you ask for it or not. To those who profit from suffering, your time is over. Earth's children are awake, and we remember who we used to be before we learned to be civilized. We are humanity. We do not conquer. We do not enslave. We do not retreat, and we do not forgive those who harm the innocent. This is your only warning." As the message ended, Kira looked up at the massive human dreadnoughts hovering protectively over her world and realized that the galaxy had just changed forever. The age of easy conquest was over. The predators who had fed on the weak for millennia now faced something they had never encountered before, a species that had chosen to become the guardian angels of the cosmos, armed with the technology of gods and the moral clarity of the righteous. Humanity had withdrawn from galactic civilization, not in weakness, but in preparation. Now they had returned, and the monsters of the galaxy were about to learn what happened when sleeping giants finally decided to wake up. "This is Admiral Sarah Chun of the Seoul Defense Force. You are hereby commanded to cease all hostile actions against the planet Lysara and its inhabitants. You have 30 seconds to begin withdrawing your forces. This is your only warning." Thales. Officers looked at him in confusion. Seoul Defense Force? Humans? The databases indicated that Earth had withdrawn from galactic affairs over 200 years ago after some political dispute with the Federation. They were supposed to be irrelevant, possibly extinct. "Open a channel," Thale ordered. "Unknown fleet, you are interfering with a legitimate syndicate military operation. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences." The response came immediately. 25 seconds. Thale felt his composure crack slightly. These humans, if that's what they were, seemed remarkably unconcerned about facing the most feared military force in the galaxy. "You dare threaten the Void Syndicate? We have conquered 73 worlds. Our fleet has never known defeat." 15 seconds. The countdown continued with mechanical precision, each second ticking away like the heartbeat of some vast machine. Thale's tactical officers ran desperate scans on the human fleet, trying to assess their capabilities, but the sensor returns made no sense. The power signatures were off the charts, the hull compositions were unknown, and the weapon systems were completely unrecognizable. 5 seconds, came the human voice. 4, 3, 2, 1. For a moment, Space was perfectly silent. Then the human fleet opened fire, and Commander Thale learned why humanity had withdrawn from galactic civilization. It wasn't because they were weak or irrelevant. It was because they had been preparing for war on a scale that the galaxy couldn't imagine. Asterisk, when monsters wake, the first salvo from the human fleet didn't look like conventional weapons fire. There were no brilliant energy beams, no explosive missiles, no flashy displays of power that characterized most galactic militaries. Instead, streams of what appeared to be metallic particles flowed from the human ships like liquid mercury, moving with purpose and intelligence through the vacuum of space. Commander Thale watched in confusion as these streams approached his fleet. What kind of weapon is this? He demanded of his tactical officer. The answer came not from his crew, but from the streams themselves. As they made contact with the Syndicate vessels, the metallic particles began to spread across the hull. Surfaces like living things, multiplying and consuming everything they touched. Within seconds, entire sections of his ship's armor began to dissolve, revealing the delicate internal systems beneath. Hull breach on decks 7 through 15. His damage control officer screamed. The hull is ... it's being eaten. Some kind of nanite swarm. Thale realized with growing horror that humanity hadn't just developed new weapons in their centuries of isolation. They had reinvented the very concept of warfare itself. These weren't crude energy blasts or explosive projectiles. These were intelligent, self-replicating systems that could adapt and evolve in real time to overcome any defense. But the nanites weren't trying to destroy their Syndicate ships completely. As sections of hull dissolved, the metallic streams began forming new structures, creating what looked like restraining cables and control interfaces. The human fleet wasn't trying to obliterate their enemies. They were capturing them alive. Admiral Sarah Chun stood on the bridge of the dreadnought Terra's Wrath, watching the tactical display with cold satisfaction. At 63 years old, she had spent most of her career preparing for this day, the day when humanity would have to remind the galaxy why Earth's children should never be underestimated. Her silver hair was pulled back in a military bun, and her dark eyes held the steady gaze of someone who had seen too much war to take pleasure in it, but who understood its necessity. Nanite capture protocols are functioning perfectly, Admiral, reported her tactical officer, Commander Park. 17 Syndicate vessels have been immobilized. Shall we begin Phase 2? Proceed, Chun replied. But remember the rules of engagement. We're here to stop a massacre, not start one. The second phase of the human assault was even more disturbing to the Syndicate forces. From the smaller human ships, sleek dropships began launching, but instead of heading toward Lysara's surface, they made directly for the captured Syndicate vessels. These boarding craft moved with impossible speed and agility, their hulls shimmering with some kind of adaptive camouflage that made them nearly invisible against the star field. Captain Marcus Ghost Reeves led the first boarding team onto the floor. Bone Harvest. His power armor was a masterpiece of human engineering, combining advanced materials science with artificial intelligence systems that could process battlefield information faster than any organic brain. The suit's exterior was matte black, designed to absorb all forms of electromagnetic radiation, making him effectively invisible to most sensor systems. The interior of the Syndicate flagship was a nightmare of organic architecture and brutal functionality. The walls were lined with trophies taken from conquered worlds, artwork from dead civilizations, preserved specimens of extinct species, and recordings of final moments from destroyed cities. The Void Syndicate didn't just conquer their enemies. They celebrated their suffering. Thermal imaging shows approximately 400 crew members aboard this vessel. Ghost reported to his team through the suit's communication system. Rules of engagement are capture where possible, but protect yourselves first. These aren't soldiers defending their homeland. These are predators who chose to hunt children. The human boarding teams moved through the syndicate ships like lethal shadows. Their power armor allowed them to walk through bulkheads as if they were paper, while their weapon systems could selectively target individuals with surgical precision. Within minutes, the entire command structure of the syndicate fleet had been neutralized, their officers found unconscious in their quarters, with no memory of how they had been defeated. Commander Thale regained consciousness to find himself restrained. In his own command chair, his ship's systems completely under human control. The bridge around him was filled with his unconscious crew members, all alive but clearly defeated. Standing before him was a human figure in power armor that seemed to absorb light itself. "You wanted to know about the Soul Defense Force," Ghost said, his voice filtered through the armor speakers with mechanical precision. "We're what happens when humanity stops pretending to be civilized." Thale tried to speak, but found that his vocal cords wouldn't obey him. Some kind of neural inhibitor was preventing him from making sound, though he could still hear perfectly. "Your species has conquered 73 worlds," Ghost continued, accessing the ship's databases with casual efficiency. "Approximately 4 billion sentient beings have died because of your actions. 4 billion individuals with families, dreams, and futures that you decided to erase for profit." The human reached out with one armored hand and placed it on Thale's forehead. Through some advanced neural interface, images began flooding the syndicate commander's mind. Every world his people had destroyed, every family they had separated, every child they had sold into slavery. But these weren't just abstract statistics. These were individual faces, individual stories of loss and suffering that the syndicate had caused. Humanity withdrew from galactic civilization because we realized that the Federation was never going to stop people like you, Ghost explained as the terrible images continued to flow. They would hold meetings, pass resolutions, express deep concern, but they would never actually act. So we decided to build our own solution. Through the ship's viewports, Thale could see the rest of the human fleet continuing its work. The larger dreadnoughts had moved into position around Lysara, their hulls opening to reveal massive fabrication systems that were already beginning to repair the damage to the planet's surface. Streams of construction nanites flowed downward, rebuilding destroyed cities with impossible speed and precision. "We spent 200 years preparing for this day," Ghost continued. 200 years developing technologies that would let us end wars instead of fighting them. Every human world became a fortress. Every human citizen became a soldier. And every human ship became a mobile planet killer, because we knew that someday someone would force us to remind the galaxy who we really are. The neural interface shut off, leaving Thale gasping and shaking from the emotional weight of what he had experienced. For the first time in his long career of conquest, he truly understood the magnitude of the suffering he had caused. "Your fleet will be towed to the nearest Federation judiciary world," Ghost informed him. "Your crews will stand trial for crimes against sentient life. Some of you will be executed. Others will spend the rest of your lives working to repair the damage you've caused. But all of you will learn that there are consequences for hunting the innocent." Down on Lysara's surface, Kira Voss stood in the ruins of New Haven, watching in amazement as human construction systems rebuilt her city around her. The work was incredibly advanced, but also strangely respectful. The humans weren't imposing their own architectural style. They were carefully restoring the original Zephyrian designs, right down to the crystal resonance frequencies that made the spires sing in the wind. Asterisk.